The fourth of the prayers, the prayer to the very secret mandala, which in the combined practice is the Mandala in your heart, is very profound. And they're all very profound, but it's extremely profound, and therefore brings us back to the simplicity, and therefore is ironically less arcane, more practical in a sense, in its meaning. But it starts out with a little bit of history, so I better give you the background. We've seen that in the three prayers we've looked at, in the first case, we're praying to Guru Rinpoche with reference primarily to his recorded deeds. In the second case, praying to Guru Rinpoche and his associated Vidyadharas as indivisible from the yidams that they practiced and came to embody. And in the third place, this morning, we were praying to Guru Rinpoche, including his five constituent Buddhas, if you will, the skull strings, as in his pure reality. The very secret prayer is, in essence, it's the same as Guru Rinpoche, but it's actually focused on a slightly different figure, who's here called Vajradharma, but who is better known simply as Vajrapani. Now, Vajradharma is the name of Vajrapani as he appeared in this form, not particular, sort of semi-wrathful. Again, you can see him on the refuge painting, Refuge Tanka. And this is the story. So for those of you who are following or will be viewing this in the clear guidance, it's on page 33. At that same time, around the same time as Guru Rinpoche appeared in the world in order to complete the Buddha's work by teaching Vajrayana, the five excellent ones of family prayed with yearning. The five excellent ones, I always think when I think of the five excellent ones, I think I would now translate it the five nobles and so on. Otherwise, I think of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. I just can't, the 80s or 90s or whatever it was, just transformed the word excellent for me. I can't take it seriously. Excellent, dude, yeah, the five excellent ones. The five excellent ones of family are important because, well, everybody's here is important, but they're significant in that they form the real personal link between the Mahayana and the Vajrayana teachings. Because of the five, and of course there's six, they have to be right. Two of them are the devas that first asked the Buddha to teach, Brahma and Indra. So the Indra here and the Brahma here are the same ones who asked the Buddha to teach. Of the others are representative. There are the Buddha's foremost still living disciples 28 years after his passing from their respective species. So there is a human, which is Vimalakirti, famous to practitioners of Chinese Buddhism for the Vimalakirti Nidesha Sutra, in which Vimalakirti defeats, dare I say it, Manjushri in debate on the meaning of emptiness. Vimalakirti representing humans. Then we have the Naga Takshaka, the Yaksha, and the Rakshasa, and one of those two devas represents the devas. So these five beings who had been studied directly with Buddha Shakyamuni, 28 years after his death, went together to Sri Lanka, to a mountain that is still a place of pilgrimage for at least five world religions. It's called Sripada. The British or whoever else colonized Sri Lanka called it Adam's Peak. On the top of Sripada, Pada of course means foot, right? Like podiatrist. So the glorious foot, Sripada, refers to this huge imprint on the rock on the top, which is this huge footprint. According to adherents of the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, that is that's Adam's footprint, hence Adam's Peak, where he, when he was thrown out of the Garden of Eden, that's where he touched the ground. So it's a pilgrimage place for those three religions. According to Hindus, it is the footprint of Shiva. According to Mahayana Buddhists, it is the footprint that the Buddha left when he left Sri Lanka at the end of teaching the Lankavatara Sutra, or the Sutra of the Buddha's journey to Sri Lanka. According to adherents of the new translation schools, such as Kajupas and Sakyapas and Gelupas, it is the footprint of the Yidam Chakvasamvara, Sri Hiruka. And according to the Nyingmapas, it is the footprint of Vajradharma, Vajrapani, as he landed on that peak in response to the supplication of those 5 individuals. Now, these 5 excellent ones, the 5 excellent dudes, basically were expressing the bereftness of their respective communities, human and non-human. Because don't forget, with the Mahayana Sutras, most of the Buddhist students are not people, they're not human people. At the absence of the Buddha, and so what now? What do we do now? And it's much more beautiful than that. It's quite long. So they prayed with yearning. Their fervor caused the sign 3 times, and holder of the secrets. Now don't forget, Vajrapani he's not only the protector of the 1,000 Buddhas of this Kalpa, but he is also the guardian of their secrets, because Vajrapani, whom we also know as Ananda, the same being, Ananda, heard all the Buddha's teachings. So Vajrapani, Ananda, Vajradharma, these are all the same. We're talking about the same person, appearing in different forms. So to give modern references now, the Jungwa Rinpoche, including the Kala Rinpoche reincarnations and so on, because they can split off into branches. But anyway. So the sign of all the victors of the 3 times and holder of the secrets of all their minds, the great Vidyadhara Vajradharma, to teach them in an emanated mansion on Mount Malaya's peak of blazing meteoric iron. Mount Malaya is, Malaya means mountain. So Mount Malaya is kind of mountain. It means Sripada. Taught them the 18 Tantras and other generation stage Mahayoga scriptures, the 16 Agamas and other Anuyoga Tantras, and the 18 mother and son mind class Tantras, as well as other great perfection scriptures. Simultaneously, the teacher Vajrasattva and nature, the mind Vajra of all Buddhas, taught all the meaning of the instruction class of the great perfection through symbol to the Vidyadhara Praya Vajra, as we saw yesterday. The Dharma taught by Vajradharma was written down by the 5 destined excellent ones with ink of gold on paper of Vaidurya. Vaidurya is lapis, but the word Vaidurya actually means beryl. It's very confusing, but anyway, think of it as lapis. And concealed as treasure in the depths of space. The uncommon Dharma taught previously by Vajradhara was concealed by Vidyadhara. Eventually, volumes containing the Tantras fell to the palace roof of the karmically destined King Ja of Uddiyana. And he's another person in the same mandala. As instructed by the Siddhacharya Kukuraja, King Ja practiced the chapter on seeing the face of Vajrasattva. Sri Vajrasattva actually appeared, explained the meaning of the tantras, and gave instruction. And then it goes on with more details, but we'll go through more of that when we go through the clear guidance itself. So this is the mandala of the disciples who received the Buddha's Vajrayana teachings from Vajradharma, whom we call Vajrapani. Vajrapani, whom we call Vajradhara. And so in the first stanza on page, in the liturgy, in the book it's page 64. In the liturgy,
I think we're 17.
17. Okay.
Namo Guru Sarva.
Yeah. So it gives the first two kayas, the all-pervading essence, the Dharma kaya, Samantabhadra. This prayer is quite long, so I'm not going to go through word by word until we get to the parts that require more discussion. Samantabhadra and Vajrasattva. And then the Nirmanakaya here is in the second stanza, the Vidyadhara Vajradharma. So the Trikaya here, instead of being Guru Rinpoche, Genrizé and Amitabha, or Guru Rinpoche and Vajrasattva and Samantabhadra, is Vajradharma, Vajrasattva, and Samantabhadra. And then it goes through the five excellent ones. Each of them is described. Kukshara is Indra, and then Brahma, groundless intelligence. They all have secret names that were given to them, mostly with the word Lodru, or intelligence in it, given to them on this occasion by Vajrapani. So Brahma, and then we've got the Rakshasa, methodical intelligence, and then the Lichavi, the human Vimalakirti, tranquil intelligence, the Yaksha, inspiring intelligence, and the Naga, Jopo, or Takshaka, ocean of intelligence. And so those are the five excellent ones, of whom there's six. I think that either Brahma or Indra is not normally enumerated among them, but they sort of work together to transmit the Buddha's teachings. And then we have at the same time or slightly thereafter the landing of the Mahayoga Tantras, the 18 Tantras on the roof of the palace of King Ja. So the last two mentioned here are the worthy King Ja, and then the Mahasiddha Kukuraja, from whom he also received these. So at this point you have 8 figures surrounding the central figure of Vajradharma. And then outside them, you have 4 great Vidyadharas, making a mandala of 12 Vidyadharas. And this is important. In the peaceful and wrathful deity mandalas in general, in your throat is the mandala of the Vidyadharas, and there are 5 groups of them, and they are the fully ripened Vidyadhara, the Vidyadhara with control over longevity, the Vidyadhara of Mahamudra, and the spontaneously present Vidyadhara, and the 5th is called the Vidyadhara who dwells on the stages. Here, these sort of archetypal or primordial Vidyadharas, who embody those 4 levels or types of attainment, are correlated with the 4 historic individuals. So if you look on the bottom of page 65, the immortal Vidyadhara with mastery of life, Padmakara. So Guru Rinpoche, although they all achieved all of these states, he's best known for his achievement of immortality. So he is the Vidyadhara with mastery of life. The Vidyadhara of spontaneous presence, Prahivajra. So Barway Dorje Prahivajra, as the first human teacher of the final teachings or ultimate teachings of Dzogchen, embodies that state of a Vidyadhara of spontaneous presence. Manjushri Mitra, who is now Barway Dorje, is the Vidyadhara of Mahamudra, and Shri Singha is here called the fully ripened Vidyadhara. So they represent these 4 individuals, the achievement of the 4 visions of leapover, which are the ultimate mastery of the four empowerments. And then there's mention of the Dakinis of the five families, as well as other Dakinis and so on, and the guardians of the gates. And I don't want to spend time on that because I want to get to the part of the prayer that is of most practical importance. At this point, having gone through all of these four prayers, we are swimming, perhaps drowning, in a sea of details, historical details, names that we can't remember, and when we can remember them, we can't pronounce them. There are theoretically books, there are actually books we could read in English that would tell us details about them, but we probably don't have time to hunt them down and read them all. So what is the use of all of this detail? That is a very valid question. That is not an irreverent question. I actually question whether there could be an irreverent question, because asking a question is actually reverence. True reverence is not blind submission. Reverence or respect is questioning, because it means you're paying attention. So what is the use? The use is, through all of this massive detail, oceans and oceans and oceans of Vidyadharas. Vidyadharas with more Vidyadharas inside of them. So many Vidyadharas more Vidyadharas than you could shake a stick at. Is that it all comes down to one figure, your root Guru. So in spite of all of these details, and the more you know of them, you will remember the details that touch you. So if you can't remember somebody's name, big deal. It didn't touch you. It's not your job to reach them. It's your job to be open. It's their job to reach you. They're Buddhas. This is their job. We don't work for Buddhas, sentient beings. Buddhas work for us. If we work for Buddhas, we'd be Buddhas. We don't work for Buddhas. So what's the point? All right, let's get to the point. Now, I don't know. I'll ask Kathy to find it in the liturgy, but in the Clear Guidance book, it's the middle of page 66. So it's the stanza that starts with the words, the Guru's body. So the point of all of this detail,
That's page 23.
good, is it all comes down to your Guru. And that's why the personal relationship with your personal root Guru is so important. There are other reasons why we can't get this stuff just out of books. But the ultimate reason is it requires human connection. Unless you have achieved the path of seeing and can actually contact the Sambhogakaya, which is not human, then it requires some actual Sambhogakaya connection. But if you're not that, if you're not Telopa, if you're not Guru Rinpoche, there has to be a human being. And it all is contained in the human being. Barway Dorje used to say this at every possible opportunity. And I can remember him sitting probably a very few feet from where I'm sitting right now, saying that don't worry about the fact that there are 100 peaceful and wrathful deities whose names you can't even remember, let alone what they look like. Because people think, oh, how will I recognize them in the bardo? I don't even know what they look like. You don't have to worry about it. All you have to remember is your Guru. So this is now explained. The Guru's body is the supreme Sangha's principle. As Buddhists, we take refuge in the three jewels. There's really, we should honor and revere all members of the Sangha, but there's really one member of the Sangha that we really take refuge in, and that's the body of our Guru, the person of our Guru. Their speech is tranquil, passionless, holy Dharma. Now, Barway Dorje used to say this a lot. When we take refuge in the Buddha, supreme among all who walk on 2 feet. The Dhamma, supreme among all that is free of attachment, and the Sangha, supreme among assemblies. We don't, therefore, expect the Sangha to be free of attachment. We're not asking the Sangha to be perfect. If the Sangha were perfect, it wouldn't be Sangha, it would be Buddha. But the Dharma has to be perfect. That's why it says the Guru's speech is tranquil, passionless, holy Dharma. That means that the Guru's person in a flesh and blood body, as Rinpoche used to say, anything can happen. Anything can happen to you. It doesn't matter, you can be a Buddha, but once you take birth in a flesh and blood body, as Trungpa Rinpoche used to explain it to me, no matter who you are 2/3 your parents. 2/3 is genetic. 1/3 is the karma you brought in. And you can't beat that. And they'll say, Tibetans know this, they'll talk about Tulkus. They say he's very good, his previous life was wonderful, but his parents have this, inherited mental illness, and so he's got to, things like that. Like one Tulku who passed away in the 70s, 80s, his previous incarnations had been renowned for their courage, but he was prey to constant fear because he was born in a family like that. And then now he was reborn, and I think it was the karma of his first recognition, and he's very courageous again. It's like if you're born to a family of drunks, you're probably going to be a drunk, even if you're the reincarnation of a Buddha. And the next one won't be, which is the thing. So we don't demand that the Guru's body be perfect. The Guru's body is the Sangha in which we take refuge, but we can, and should demand that the Guru's speech be tranquil. Tranquil in this case means not necessarily nice, it means free from personal interest or agenda. Not buffeted by the winds of selfishness. Passionless, free from attachment. So the Guru's speech is Dhamma. Of course we have written words, and we have paintings, and we have the building, and all of these things are Dharma, but when push comes to shove, the Dharma we practice is our Guru's speech, Rinpoche's speech. As one of you mentioned this morning, if it weren't for Barway Rinpoche's Barway Rinpoche, we'd all be out the door. This is not enough to keep me here. I love it. I translated it. I literally worship it. I love all of this. But I'm not here because of that. I'm not here for the statues. I'm not here for the mantras. I'm here, and I think this is true of all of us, because of one person. Sorry. Okay. And his mind is limitless, unmoving Sambuddha. The Guru's mind is Buddha. Not anybody can be a Guru. You can have Bodhisattva Gurus, and that's nice. But you really want a Guru who's a Buddha. Barway Rinpoche is a Buddha. We know that from reading Precious Essence and other accounts. Even with physical and mental illness in that life, that does not take away the fact that he's a Buddha. That person in between lives is everywhere. That's why when Terchen Barway Dorje's students asked him, where should we pray to after you die? He laughed, said, you think I'm going to be here and not there? It doesn't work that way. When someone has truly exhausted all things, the great exhaustion of Dharmata, they're everywhere. And then they take rebirth and then they can, but that's always just part of them. There's always more than that. They're always everywhere. They're not just, thank you, they're not just in one place. For example, when teaching in 2008 in a place not far from here, the Karmapa said, right now I am also a farmer in Western New York State. It's very interesting. I checked this with other people who heard Tibetan to make sure that it just wasn't weird voices in my head saying this that I translated. And he really did say it, but almost nobody remembers it, and it somehow never showed up later. But he said, I'm there and here at the same time. I can smell the manure. He said, I can smell the manure. I'm there and I'm here at the same time. So they're never just what we see. But when they take birth in a flesh and blood body, they are subject to the genetic inheritance that, as Trungpa Rinpoche said to me, is 2/3 of any of us. But that being the case, the Guru's body is the Sangha, the Guru's speech is the Dharma, and the Guru's mind, of course, is the Buddha. So it says, I pray to the Guru, the embodiment of all the three jewels. And you don't have to try to pretend. You don't have to convince yourself. If you remember that your Guru has a lineage and is therefore inseparable from Guru Rinpoche, was Manjushri Mitra in a previous life, was this person, that person did this, great. But even if you don't remember that, if you just remember them, if they're the real thing, like Barway Dorje, then that's enough. It restates the same thing. In your Dharmakaya mind, Sambhogakaya speech, and Nirmanakaya body, all Buddhas of the three times are present. We talk a lot, especially I talk a lot because it's my job, about Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya. But these are still, they're not unreal concepts, but they're somewhat vague, somewhat diaphanous concepts. The way to bring it, the only Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya that really reaches us is the mind, speech, and body of our Guru. Your qualities are the yidams, your activity, the dakinis. I pray to the Guru, the embodiment of all victors. Now, what is our goal? What is our, what's the plan? As one of you mentioned this morning, and we're going to get back to this soon, we're given all these rigid maps and instructions and plans. And first you do this, and then you do that, and then you do this, and you do exactly 1,300,000.2 of these mantras, and then and only then will you be able to go on to that. But then you must go on to that, and But what is the plan? What are we doing? The plan is very simple. From now until I achieve supreme awakening, I will practice in emulation of you. That's the plan. That's why people typically practice what their Guru practiced. And it's not because they feel they should. It's not because they feel it's their job. It's because they love their Guru. The yidam, the practice, is the language of love that you speak to your Guru. So, the next stanza says, in this life, the next and between, I have no hope other than you. Hold me with your compassion. The Guru alone is the essence of refuges. If you take nothing else from this weekend, remember that one line. The Guru alone is the essence of refuges. Because that is the whole point of Vajrayana. Now people will argue otherwise, and free speech, right? But the truth is that that's how it works. Techniques are valuable and profound, and we're very fortunate to receive teachings on techniques. But our techniques alone are not going to get us out of this mess. It's our love for a Guru. The Guru's love is a given. But our love has to come from our side. And that is what will get us through. Now, then the text goes on with a step-by-step description of the process of dying and different levels of the bardo, and just praying to the Guru, protect me from this, protect me from that, may I recognize this, may I recognize that. And it's not hard to understand, and it's a lot of information, so I'm going to let you read through it on your own. I don't think you need me to go through it. The real point here is that it's the Guru. Kathy, would you go on with your question from this morning, please? And then after Kathy's question has been dealt with, then we'll take other questions. But I think it's important to talk, more important to talk about the real things than just for me to read to you what you can read for yourselves.
So I guess to circle back to my part 2 is, yes, when we're having these nuts and bolts and do this and do that, and I've struggled, and part of this is hard because this took place in a private interview, so it's not, but you and I discussed it, we're going to go there.
Yeah.
But I remember Rinpoche telling us before he passed that there are countless numbers of practices, and that we need to do the things that change, that we know, that only we know changes our mind. That the whole point of doing all of this stuff is to change our mind. And if we're brutally honest with ourselves, we know which things are actually changing our mind.
Yeah.
That being said, he gave me a lot of leeway on what to do next.
Okay.
I mean, my last interview with him was, okay, you've done these prereqs, now do what you want. Then he passed, and I had to figure out, okay, what should I want to do? And I read some commentaries, and I decided, okay, I should do this next.
Okay.
And I started doing that, and I asked Lama T for instructions, and I started doing it, and I did a bunch of it, and I felt a connection with that practice. So I'm telling my story because I think others will relate. So I went to Lama Chotop, and I respectfully said, okay, I feel like I've got this, but I'm nowhere near the prescription of doing this. But I really want to start doing some Dakini practice because when I do the group practice, I don't feel a connection with that. And I would like to start doing that, and I would like to develop a connection because I frankly don't like doing Dakini practice, but I wanted to. And so I'm telling my personal story. So I was told no. Do the prescription.
You mean the required number?
The required number of that, and I didn't like that answer. And I was going through other really hard things in my life, so I started freewheeling it, and feeling a little lost. And it's time to find myself again. And so that's part of more of the part two than I would have said this morning.
Well, there are.
Then I'm lost always. Because I
I've known people who were required, for the sake of standardization, to do practices that did nothing for them. I've dealt with this over the last, overtly I've dealt with it since 1990. And in cases where in instances where such cases came under Barway Rinpoche's view, where he was asked, he would always, in the cases that I saw, tell them that, well, there's an assumption that you will stop if it's not working, that you'll know. So on the one hand, Rinpoche specifically did not favor telling people to smash their heads repeatedly against a brick wall. That's one aspect of the situation. The other aspect is what St. John of the Cross called the dark night of the soul. And the dark night of the soul is something that I think we all experience to varying degrees and at varying times. Especially, it can indicate a time of to borrow the words of one of you, a time of metamorphosis. Because we only change when we have no choice. We only change when we have no other possibility. That's just how it is. It's just how things work. And so sometimes we can be doing the right thing, and it can be hell and horror. And that can last for a while. But when that's a possibility, it's a good idea to check in frequently with whoever is the prescribing teacher, and make sure that that they really understand what you're talking about, because given the experience of doing the right thing and going through something very difficult that you need to go through, and the experience of doing the wrong thing and spinning your wheels and being miserable because deep down you know you're spinning your wheels, can be very easy to confuse for one another, for us when we're going through this. I think everybody's experienced this in different areas of our lives. I mean, and there have been many cases where great masters, think of Marpa in particular, saw this in the future of their students and gave them instructions to be employed at that time. So it was a specific case where Milarepa hit a wall, and Marpa had given him a scroll not to be opened until he hit a wall. And Milarepa, when saying goodbye to Marpa, had asked him, he said, "How will I know? You say I'm not supposed to open this or practice this until I need to. How am I going to know when I need to?" And Marpa said, "Oh, you'll know." So I guess there's a point where we know that it's time to make a change. So all of that is in general, about the situation you're describing as it applies to all of us in general. In the specific sense, I think that well, again, I'll quote from Barway Dorje talking about other people. Barway Dorje had some students who were in a situation similar to what you're describing, with another of their teachers who had prescribed something. And when he would say to them, "Well, do you have to keep on doing that? Why do you have to keep on doing that?" And they would say, "Well, Lama so-and-so told me that I have to do it." And Rinpoche would say to me, he said, "I don't know if they're really making it clear to Lama so-and-so what they're experiencing, because I know Lama so-and-so, and Lama so-and-so would not make them continue to do this if he or she understood what it was doing to them." And I'm talking about more than one case, so if anyone's listening who thinks I'm talking about them, it's possible, but you'd only be one of several cases. And this happens all the time, simply because, I mean, it's like it happens with prescription medicine. I mean, I suffer from restless leg syndrome, and my PCP gave me a standard, the first go-to for it, and I nearly fucking died. I mean, that night, and I was taking a non-therapeutic get-to-know-you dose. I mean, I've had some bad nights, but that was like, it's like the worst motion sickness, insomnia, and everything unpleasant all at once. That movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once? Well, this was everything everywhere bad all at once. And so then I went, later the doctor said, "How's that going?" And I said, "Well, I stopped taking it." And they weren't surprised. They just said, my doctor just said, "Well, yeah, perhaps you shouldn't continue that." I said, "You think?" At some point, the patient has to exercise their privileges of having common sense. I mean, but it's a tricky point, because there are also our defense mechanisms and resistance, and also these practices for us, because we're not in intensive retreats, and even if we were, are not happening in a vacuum. They're happening in the middle of our lives. And our lives are very complex because we live in a complex society. Most people have jobs, and in some cases businesses that they run. And so there's a question of how the practice interacts with your profession, your responsibilities, and that includes very mundane details like how long it takes to chant that thing, And with all due respect to our many, many great teachers and instructors, I don't think any Tibetan Lama I've met understands what it is like for American English-speaking Americans to chant in Tibetan. They can't.
That's a whole other topic.
And I've gotten into, I get a little bit into trouble with this because, you know, people sponsor the translations I'm doing, and I've received some feedback because people thought I was getting a little bit above myself and suggesting that we might have independent English language literature, which I didn't even suggest, but I got some in the emails from my patrons. Some of my patrons didn't like maybe I was getting a little bit above myself, perhaps butting my head against a glass ceiling. Anyway, but there's no way, you know. The most courageous in this regard of Tibetans will do things like Lama Trongtok, who will actually chant in English along with people. When something's been chanted in English, he'll do his best. And he admits it's bloody fucking hard. It's even harder than chanting in Tibetan because English, I mean, it's a very, very unfriendly language for an outsider because I don't know how to pronounce anything. Houston or Houston? I mean, really, we're Milan? Really? Milan? You call that town Milan? Even Shakespeare, Duke of Milan, you know. I mean, it's like you can't read English and know what you're saying. I mean, it's how to pronounce it. So, but then Lama Trongtok, so he's starting to understand, and some of them do. But it's so because practitioners here are so busy, have so many responsibilities, have very stressful lifestyles. I mean, there's a difference. I mean, not everybody here is a surgeon or an air traffic controller, but I know all of you well enough to know that you all deal with stressful situations in one area or another. Well, I don't know you that well, so I can't say that, but I assume if you're here, you know, and the rest of you I know. I mean, like me. I mean, we're dealing with stuff. We don't, you know. Nobody makes our bed in the morning, except us. And so when you meet with your MI, your meditation instructor, which is in this case the Lama who runs the community. In your case, it would be Lama Trongtok. You need to really give them all the info. Make sure that they understand what you're talking about, what you're dealing with. In other words, when you talk to your doctor after you're taking a prescription, you got to tell them all the side effects. Sometimes when I talk to my doctor, and I use doctors as an example because there's two of them, I can make them uncomfortable. When I talk to my doctor, sometimes I'm a little too intimidated by her. My doctor's a girl, female, woman. I'm a little too intimidated by her learning to honestly tell her that something is not working. That something is not, I want it to work. I don't want to hurt her feelings. And we're like that with our lamas. Well, we shouldn't be like that with our doctors. I'm not saying we should be rude to them, but we should be honest. Because how are they going to know? No, they need us to tell them. And physicians have told me this. The biggest problem with the way medicine is practiced now, you don't have time you can't diagnose patients in many cases without a conversation, and you don't have time to have a conversation. Well, it's all the more true with MIs, with meditation instructors. And Barway Dorje used to tell me this, even if it's the Karmapa, even if your meditation instructor is the Karmapa, you need to verbalize. You need to tell them. And he said, and he used to teach this here. He used to say this, but he used to say this to me because because I had personal interchanges with His Holiness. He used to say, you gotta tell him stuff. Because yes, he's omniscient, but still, you gotta tell him. don't rely upon the assumption of omniscience. So I think that we sometimes tend to assume that Tibetan lamas know more about what's going on with us than they really do. And I think the evidence of that is that, as we've discussed, there is a learning curve for them. All of them have gone through it in terms of their expectations about Western students, because we sound so smart, we sound so glib. They think that we're getting it. And then 20 years down the line, they discover that people are still not getting it. And Lama Chotok was talking about this the other day.
I was going to say, this whole conversation was in the board meeting, which was a brilliant conversation.
Well, it was before the board meeting per se, because you were there. So it was still not in the closed,
Well,
yeah, it was before the board, but he was talking about things he talks about anyway. So I'm going to quote him. And anyway, there is a learning curve, and we can help them by giving them feedback. And we shouldn't be afraid to hurt their feelings. If we look at the conversations, the recorded conversations between Guru Rinpoche and Yeshe Gyamtso, the questions that she asks him, whether we assume that she actually asked those questions because she had them, or that she was asking them because she knew somebody in the future would have them, or even if we're skeptical and think somebody later wrote the whole thing down and the conversation is spurious, doesn't matter. The tradition records the validity of asking hard questions. So the questions that teachers get irritated by, and that, as a translator, you've seen me get snippy about, she asked Guru Rinpoche those questions. Like, why should I imagine myself as a deity with an animal head? That's weird. Or, we've got some of our Rothwell deities are standing on the gods of Hinduism. That's sick, isn't it? She would ask these questions, and do we really need to get on? Come on, tell us the truth. Is it really any point to it? You read the texts, Advice from the Lotus Born, and all these texts. She asks those questions. And whether she had them or not, I think the message, what we can take from that is it's legitimate to ask those questions. So and we have to be prepared to be wrong. Maybe we should be doing the thing that we're told to do that doesn't seem to be working for us. But we're not going to get anywhere if we're in doubt. We need to resolve that. And if we ask our functioning teacher, the MI, the meditation instructor, are you sure I should still be doing this? Because these are the side effects. If they say, yes, I understand the side effects, I've heard what you're saying, and I feel that you should still continue, recite the standard number, then you won't be in doubt, and you can keep on going. So don't be shy, bring it up. And I think that's true for all of us. And I think we have to question, because there are no guarantees. There is no guarantee that if you chant such and such is going to happen. Our motivation can change, our level of distractedness, our stress level, and what everything else going on in our life. None of this happens in a vacuum. So I don't know if that has anything to do with your question, but it just kind of all came out. Next question.
Just following right along with this, when you say whether it's working or not, obviously each of us has to assess that on our own, but maybe if there were some guidelines to say exactly what you mean by whether it's working.
Well, the texts, when you do a practice in retreat, first of all, they don't actually take practice outside of retreat that seriously. Well, I remember when Lama Yeshe first came here, and he was asking Barway Dorje, I was there, he said, they talk about their practice, they say they're practicing this, practicing that. What do they mean? And Rinpoche said they're talking about katun, which means just your daily chanting. He said that's what they call practice. We just call it katun. They'd only consider it practice if you're in retreat. So the whole thing about prescribed number of mantras, unless it's Ngondro, it doesn't count unless it's in retreat, actually, strictly speaking. In other words, if there's a rule book, that's what the rule book says. If there's no rule book, then who cares? But, for example, with the Guru Rinpoche practice, Lama Yeshe gives people the short daily one to accumulate the mantra. You should not be accumulating the mantra with the short daily one. You should be accumulating the mantra with the practice we do on the 10th day. And he says, well, they won't do it. I think he just doesn't want to go through the process of getting people to do it. Because there's a big difference between visualizing those deities in your body and not. You're not doing the combined practice unless you've got all of that happening. You're doing the daily practice that's really just the outer practice. And that's fine, it's great, it's beneficial. Everything's beneficial. Chenrezig is beneficial, taking and sending is beneficial, offering one flower is beneficial. But if we're going to be rigid about numbers, we got to be real rigid with the real thing, not rigid with empty flat tires, if you know what I mean. So strictly speaking, the notion of the prescribed number, it only counts if it's in retreat.
Which isn't what we're doing.
No. So, it's really, there are different ways. There are 3 ways of asserting the required amount of a practice. The best way, the middling way, and the worst way. The best way is through science. Evidence in either actual experience while awake, or in hypnagogia, when in between wakefulness and sleep, or in dreams. But they'll say those dreams are very, very different in what they mean if you're in retreat as opposed to not being in retreat. Then the second best is through time. So 3 months doing a certain practice, assuming a certain number of hours a day, or 6 months doing it. And then, or if it's a group practice, group chanting, where everything is intensified by the group, then it can be a week. And that you can actually gain something through that week. Then you're really doing something. And then the worst way, they say, and they say this, and I'm being traditional here. We're talking about rules. Well, I'm talking about, the rule book. Is the number. The number is kind of like at least you should say this number. At the very least, they'll say this number. And so the basic rule with the number of mantras is, with most practices, with most mantras, it's 100,000 times multiplied by the number of syllables in the mantra. And of course, they can count the number of syllables in different ways. Vajra is 2 syllables, sometimes it's 1 syllable, sometimes because they like certain numbers more than others. So you can kind of fudge it a little bit just to get the number you like. But basically, so like with the Kila mantra, for example, Some people say it's 15 syllables, some people say it's 14 syllables, and some people say it's 12 syllables, but it's the same mantra. You know, Sarva, because there's no dot, well, there shouldn't be a dot between, you know, anyway, so whatever. Usually for Kila, it's 12. They'll say 12 in the new translation, I mean, the new Tamil schools, but whatever. So that would mean 1,200,000 Kila mantras said in the context of the sadhana during a period of your life, usually a month or less, where you are practicing 4 times a day. The 4 sessions must be done for it to really, you know, honestly, to be kosher. We're talking about kosher here, right? So if it's kosher, because the 4 times a day correspond to different states, of course, the activities and so on, and there are reasons for all of this. And you know, it's when they say, well, we can bend that because people don't want to do retreat. It's just practice as much as you can outside of retreat. Well, that's fine, but then let's admit that we're bending it. And then if we're bending that, then we can't be quite as rigid, I think, about things like number. I am not an opponent of telling people I have to do numbers. I have trained people in the embodiment of 3 jewels, and when they were trained by me, they had to do 10 million Guru Rinpoche mantras before hearing 1 word of Dzogchen. So no one alive is tougher on numbers than me. No Tibetan, no anybody else. So I'm not a softie. I'm not coming from a soft place. But to be rigid with people not in retreat is just dumb. Sorry. You were saying?
So I was wondering about how to personally assess whether a practice is doing what it's
Well, you
meant.
have to go to the commentary for that practice. When you're really taught a practice, you will be given the reading transmission and the detailed word-by-word guidance in the commentary, which will have a section that will detail the signs of success and the signs of messing up, specific things to look for. Some of them are generic, but some of them are specific to the practice. Without that guidance, as many teachers have taught, without that guidance, you're shooting arrows in the dark. So, am I criticizing the way Vajrayana practices are taught in this country? You decide for yourself.
Would it be
I'm on a rant. You got me going, Kathy. You got me going.
And you egged me on to egging you on.
Yeah. Well, that's where I'm at today, because you know it's like
You primed the pump in the hallway.
I did. Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that one is developing a certain personal feeling and connection with the practice, and that one it's helping to deepen one's devotion to one's guru, and at the
Yes.
same time have compassion for
Yes.
all beings? I mean, would that be the bottom line?
Well, the basic, I mean, the supreme signs, what are called the chogita, the supreme signs are, those are very, very simple and standard. Devotion, compassion, and determination to be free. If your devotion increases, your compassion for others increases, and your determination to be free of the cause of suffering within yourself, if those increase, then whatever you're doing, it's working. And if those decrease, if you become less and less devoted, less and less compassionate, and more addicted to samsaric pleasures and other causes of suffering, in other words, less and less willing to give up your own crap, whatever your own personal crap is, then it's not working. It's very simple. That all of the texts say. Yeah, that definitely. And that is more important than number. You know, I think, personally. Oh, wait, it's not me. I'm quoting Jungkook Cultural the Great. Sorry.
taking questions?
I am.
Okay.
If they dare.
This is from online. It's not necessarily a question, but you can address it.
Okay.
I have heard a few opinions from two lamas about why I can hardly visualize even simple visualizations, and sometimes just stop visualizing them and try to have faith that they are there. How to get better?
Well, there is a condition called what's the proper name for it? Aphantasia. It's called aphantasia. You should know this, right? People have it, and they can't imagine pictures. They can't imagine, and I know people who have that, and so they don't visualize. And maybe I don't know if that's the only thing I know about that. In terms of the advice concerning the 3 points of clarity, pride, and stability, no. Clarity, stability, and purity. That requires detailed guidance based on again, proper instruction in the practice you're doing. You cannot, as Jungulu Drutai wrote, Vajrayana practice is not a self-help. He says you should receive detailed guidance in any Vajrayana practice you do, and not try to figure it. If you try to figure it out yourself, it is uncertain what the result will be. And sometimes lamas are very lazy. They don't want to teach, so they'll say, just do it. And so I don't know who asked that question or what their context is, but basically, if they've had detailed practical instruction on a specific practice from two lamas, then they should go with that if they trust that. And but there are specific instructions that are not entirely practice specific, but fairly practice specific on how to balance attention to the clarity of the image, recollection of the image's meaning, devotion, non-conceptuality, and so on. And as these are part of and go to the techniques of the generation stage themselves, these require detailed instruction. To give off-the-cuff answers about such a question in this context, without knowing what they're talking about or anything, would be unethical on my part. I got lots of time. Come on.
All right.
Yeah, go for it.
Since you brought up the topic, it's something I struggle with,
Okay.
is the chanting in Tibetan, doing the group practice,
Yes.
and not having any clue what I'm saying while I'm saying it.
Yeah.
So, and I remember having this conversation with Barway Dorje,
Mm-hmm.
and he was in that kind of mood that day, and he was like, well, you practice on your own most of the time, you don't practice in a group that often, so basically his answer to me was, just suck it up and say the Tibetan. Was kind of the mood he was in.
He was in
that
the stiff upper lip mode.
Yeah, he was in that mode that day.
Yeah.
And I kind of stopped off because that wasn't the answer I wanted. And
Yeah.
But it never hurt me when Barway Rinpoche gave me the answer I didn't want.
Yeah, I know, right? He had a way of doing it.
And I miss having that situation and that relationship now, which is part of my previous question, why I'm a little afraid to go back, because I value that relationship so well, and it's all I've got right now that I can't afford to be. I can't afford to mess that up or get angry. So then I'm better to just not start the conversation.
Yeah.
But that's not where my question started. I just just.
But it's it's part of the.
But that's why I haven't gone back for a second interview.
The thing about different people have different solutions to the chanting gibberish problem. When I first started out, I did everything except for the mantras, which are in supposed Sanskrit. I did everything in Tibetan at a time when I couldn't read a word of it. But I was young, I was 18, 19, and so what I found happened was that this was originally with the Karma Kajju Mahamudra Munro, which was the first sort of, aside from Chenji, it was the first thing that I did every day in Tibetan. What I found happened was that I very quickly had memorized the sounds that I had to make. And so on. And so I would read the English translation as I was making the gibberish sounds. And so it was no different to me than chanting it now, where the gibberish sounds are no longer gibberish. They mean something. Well, wait a second.
Okay.
So one solution, and I mentioned this because other people have done the same thing, where they find that they memorize the liturgy, the sounds. The way people who sing in foreign languages, but without knowing the language do. And in that case, they read the meaning. However, as my example indicates, that's only practical in cases of something you're doing every day. So when you have long liturgies, like let's say the yearly things that are not done even monthly, and because you're walking and chewing gum at the same time with these things. In your case, you're almost invariably playing the drum, which means you're trying to follow a belligerent co-drummer who's trying to mess with your mind.
I've got a triangle between you and Lama.
Yeah. Well, at least you can see him. Because if they've got the jolling people playing, especially the sit at the front edge people, then I can't see him, so I'm the last person to know what's going on. So I sometimes end up following you. But you've just got too much going on to be able to read the Tibetan while glancing back and forth down at the English. So you're not going to like my answer. And nobody else is going to like my answer. And I'm going to get phone calls tonight and probably emails tomorrow. But here it is. You shouldn't have to. I'm sorry. You shouldn't have to. There are sanghas where people chant. His Holiness, the Karmapa, does this at the Kajju Manlam. It's very difficult to do, and sometimes the translations can be a little bit odd, but where people are chanting all together the same melody in their native languages. The aspiration prayers have been translated in such a way that the English, the Chinese, because don't forget, at the Kajju Manlam, we're not talking about English and Tibetan. We're talking about English, French, German, Spanish, Italian, Ukrainian, Russian, Swedish, Norwegian. I don't know about Finnish. And Chinese,
Mandarin.
plus Thai, and a whole bunch of languages from all over the world, all being chanted at once. And they have to be chanting at the same meter, and it works. And there are, I won't mention any names, but there are Vajrayana, Tibetan Vajrayana Sanghas, where that is starting to be done, or has started to be done as well. But we're very conservative, frankly. You know, we're not as conservative as some places nearby, but we're, you know, in terms of allowing the English language to rear its evil head. But we're pretty conservative, so it's hard. But the only honest answer I can give you is you're damn straight. You shouldn't have to. Sorry, that's not helpful, but it's there. I can't lie to you. You know, it's fine for me. I understand written Tibetan. Well, not a newspaper necessarily, but Dharma Tibetan, as well as I understand written English at this point. And it's a hell of a lot easier to chant because it's monosyllabic. And I think of these concepts in Tibetan. I mean, I have to translate these ideas into English before I can talk about them or write them down in English on paper in my head. So it's very easy. It would be very easy for me to say, you should just have more devotion and just realize that it's important to have faith. Understanding is secondary. But I don't lie. I used to lie. I was trained to lie. I don't lie anymore.
Yeah,
Sorry. I'm not calming you down, am I?
no, I'm trying to decide if I'm gonna tell my next story, but I think maybe I'll let it pass.
Really?
Oh, that's probably the good one.
Yeah, that's 5 minutes, Kathy. Come on, let's go out with a
But
bang.
Peter had his hand up,
Oh, okay. All right.
so if Peter's doesn't take too long, then I'll tell my story because but I'll give him
All right.
up.
I'm aware of a Sangha where retreat is stressed for the students at a certain point. I believe they do maybe 1 or 2 2-week retreats when they first become a formal student of this teacher. And then I'm not sure exactly how it works, but they encourage traditional 100-day retreats. You know,
Yeah.
and the students obviously have to work up to that point, but
Right.
it's totally encouraged and I wouldn't say formalized, but I guess it is somewhat formalized. And I'm wondering if, you know, if you feel that we should be heading in somewhat that direction.
Well, this is what, when Barway Dorje first told Lama Yeshe that he wanted to start teaching Dzogchen, in Lama Yeshe's training, there were only 2 contexts in which, you know, full-blown Dzogchen was taught. One is if you do it as part of a 3-year retreat, and the other, and the far more common, is the 100-day retreats. And there were traditionally 2 or 3 of them. You would do a 100-day retreat on Lojong, the mind training, during which, in between sessions, you have to complete the entire Monro. And then there'd be, I'm not quite sure how the stuff in between worked, and then the main 100 days is just the practice of Lipo Tuga. And then, of course, there's a lot of stuff in between, Rushin and all the other things. And that's how, back where he's from, that's how they do it. And the idea is, you know, you really need to, you're going to get a lot more out of doing it that way. Because you're not doing anything else. You know, especially when you get to the practice of leap over, one of the requirements of the practice to do it really properly is to do nothing else. And so they do that by doing it for 100 days at a time. And as you may remember, Lama Chöktrap's mother has done this about 7 times. And practically every winter she does 100 days of leap over practice. I mean, it's amazing she's still there. You know, you'd think that she's, and that's what they do. So when Rinpoche said to Lama Chöktrap, I'd like to start teaching Dzogchen, then Lama Chöktrap said, okay, well, we need to arrange 100-day retreats. But then Rinpoche brought up the point that for many reasons, this isn't going to happen here yet. So to answer your question, is it a direction we need to move in? Absolutely. 100%. How fast we can move in that direction, I don't know. There's a whole bunch of shit we got to do. We haven't even had a Drupchen. This tradition, the Barway Dorje tradition, is all about Drupchens. You know, we haven't even had one. We haven't even done Kila, and forget about even a Drupchen, we haven't even done a Kila Puja yet, except for, the little bit that you do before but what you do before the Mahakala in the evening, that's just the Kila daily practice. That's just chanting. That's not considered a Kila full-blown, We haven't even done that. And it's been, 20 years? Because it takes us a long time. And that's fine. It's fine that it takes us a long time. But as your question brings up, we have to keep moving in the right direction. And that direction includes 100-day retreats and Drupchens. We have to at some point. I mean, Garchen Rinpoche's people do 5 or 6 of those things every year? They're no different from us. I'm quite convinced that each and every member of Garchen Rinpoche Sangha has 1 head, 2 arms, and 2 legs. So they're just like us. And if we say it's our age, well, there are old people there too. And if we say we're too young, there are young people there too. So if they can do it, we can do it. But it's a question of time. And so on the one hand, we have to, as you indicated, and put well in your question, that we have to have a sense of that direction, that we want to move in that. But we can't also hold ourselves hostage to a possible future. And so we need to do what we can and gradually increase. And, the issue that you brought up about the language problem, we don't have an immediate solution. For one thing, most of the people who make up this Sangha seem to want to chant in Tibetan, at least in groups. And so that certainly works well for the Lamas, for, Lama Chöktrap, Lama Nyima. And down the line, what will happen? I mean, who knows? Again, we have to be careful about the difference between evolution and revolution. I quoted Siddhi Rinpoche mentioning yesterday. Any changes we make have to be made gradually and slowly. But in terms of a direction, yeah, we want to be moving in that direction. We want 100-day retreats. We want Drupchens, and more than one. Lama Chöktrap used to say to me, he said, "This is easy. It's going to be easy." He said, 1 year we'll do Kila, and they'll learn it. And then the next year we'll do Trolut, and they'll learn that. And then next year we'll do the, Hayagriva Kila, and they'll learn that. And then we can branch out and do Chenrezig and things like that, stuff like that. He thought it would just be a matter of just getting it started and people would roll it. I mean, these things are translated. Translation is not the hard thing here. I mean, it's hard, but there's actually less finagling to be done. I mean, the heavy lifting is implementing these things and getting them all organized, creating chantable texts and so on, and training people in the ritual details, and so that they deal with it takes us a long time to learn things, partly because of the language barrier, partly because people have busy lives. And then another issue is we're very, very small. We're a very small Sangha. I mean, as a church, we're a small church, even by Red Hook standards. And this is not, this is not mega church Florida. I mean, but still, we're a small. And so somebody has to do all the work, and when you talk about retreats and drupjans, I mean, somebody has to cook, somebody has to leave, somebody has to, and the people here who've been picking up all the I mean, we've got one person who brings the flowers and pays for them all the time. We've got another person who's basically doing everything. We've got thank God, the divine baker. We've got people are stepping up, but there's not that many of us, and there's a lot to do. So that's an issue too. I mean, it's not just, but yes, we will. If we want to, we will. I don't think we can ever expect to chant endless, lengthy liturgies that they would do, Tibetan, like when Lama Tata likes to get, wax nostalgic about. We get up at 1 a.m. and start chanting, and we only went to bed 5 minutes later. And, and there's a certain amount of machismo in that, and I think it's lovely, but we're not going to be doing that here. But we definitely will be doing 24/7 drupjans, where it's 6 sessions a day, where it lasts for a week. Everybody's on for 4 sessions. They get 2 sessions off, and you switch. And I know we can do it because I've done it with other sanghas, and it can be done. And the people who do that, they have 1 head and 2 arms and 2 legs. They're just regular folks like us. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, we can. But we have to be patient with ourselves. And, with all of the process it takes to implement these things. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope some of what I said was useful. Remember, with these prayers, the point is devotion, and you'll remember the details that touch your heart. And don't worry about it. If it were supposed to be memorized, they wouldn't give you the books. It's not theater. You don't have to perform it without the stage directions in front of you. So we'll conclude with the dedication. Sanam de dam je zempa lo ne le ranam bam je gana je malan rumbai simbe zole Yaman de Yedrawon Sana Yeshe Gyamtso Sana Yeshe Gyamtso Allah Thank you.
Are you driving?